On September 30th of this year, Paramount Plus announced the release of their new series, Unidentified with Demi Lovato, featuring this as part of their trailer.
Okay. She has trauma.
She does?
Mm-hmm. I have trauma too. So I feel you, and I get it.
You should sing something for her, Demi.
No!
Why not? Maybe if you sing a song as an offering, we could come back in the room.
Oh, yeah. Do you have to make me feel like there's nothing left of me? You can take everything I have.
Immediately, I was hooked, and what followed became a deep dive into the world of paranormal reality television. By the end of it, the only thing I couldn't identify was my sanity. Let's get into it.
Hey Jack, who were you touching earlier? What was her name? Your mom?
Is this spirit being a smartass by saying that it was touching my mom?
The first episode of this short 4-episode series starts off with a pretty basic rundown. Demi Lovato has always been in touch with the paranormal, particularly extraterrestrials. They were abducted by aliens and recorded footage of UFOs back in 2020. They theorize that aliens are likely peaceful and will possibly one day stop fascism in the United States. Oh, did I say basic? I meant absolutely insane assumptions made in the first 2 minutes of the very first episode. Demi is accompanied by their sister, Dallas Lovato, who we'll later learn is really into ghosts, and Matthew, who is an easily swayed skeptic who acts as an audience placeholder. Demi is our main character, and everything we discover through this first episode relates back to their experience of being abducted by aliens, but we'll get back to that in a second. In the first episode, the gang heads to Tenunga Canyon in California and meets up with the so-called UFO bros, who have their own probe cast. After doing a little bit of research on them, they seem to be most famous for their Storming Area 51 Facebook Live special. It's, pretty uneventful. A little bit douchey and awkward. Before they do some sky watching, one of the bros shows them some footage of UFOs flying around in a group of 3. He tells them a story about an alien abduction that happened to a couple where they were missing time and were able to re-remember their experiences through something called regressive hypnotherapy. Remember this: 3 UFOs, hypnosis. Okay? Cool. They spend about 7 minutes out of the 45-minute episode doing actual research. They quickly see something weird, assume it's an alien, and moved on. Before I get into the much weirder next segment of this episode, I want to talk about what stands out to me the most from my first impression. Not the weird, creepy editing, not the strange, frequently intrusive music, but the tone. This show does not establish a tone at all. And although it may seem like a good thing that this ridiculous series doesn't take itself too seriously, the ultimate problem, in my opinion, is that one person does, and that's Demi Lovato themselves. See, Dallas and Matthew do not believe them. They even state this in the intro to the series. They're seen constantly laughing, but it's very clear to me that Demi is not in on the joke. Although it's kind of cute and fun watching them ride around telling alien ghost stories, it's pretty apparent that Demi takes the show much more seriously than their co-hosts. Even the UFO bros are laughing, the dudes who built their entire career on this stupidly fake thing. This will be a recurring theme throughout the show. Moving on. The gang goes to this woman's house to interview her about her own alien abduction experiences, and what she says is absolutely, quite clinically, insane. She starts off by stating she was abducted by aliens when she was very young. She believes her experiences so strongly that she literally divorced her husband over it. When she was in her early teens, she began to have cysts and miscarriages without being sexually active. Through regressive hypnotherapy, though, she says that she was able to remember it all incredibly vividly. She was impregnated by aliens, but those aliens rejected her vessel. thus resulting in multiple alleged miscarriages. However, one day, the aliens re-abduct her and showed her her alien children. All 24 of them! And look, she even drew pictures! Oh my god, even Demi doesn't believe her! Where is this going? Is this some Stan Romanek starseed bullshit again? Okay, hear me out. It might seem like I'm making fun of this woman, and yeah, I mean, I am a little bit, but this woman is clearly mentally ill. And just because this definitely didn't happen does not mean she can't be emotionally affected by it. I believe that she believes this happened to her, and coincidentally, so does Demi. When this woman was talking about her cyst, she explained that the doctors told her this could be caused by stress or anxiety, when she believes that her cysts can only happen when you're sexually active, which is not true. In fact, ovarian cysts can happen to children, and many, many people with uteruses experience them as well. Demi goes, you know what? I also had frequent cysts when I was younger, like 15 or so. And even their sister is shocked. You know, like the person they lived with. And yeah, Demi, I'm sure you did. A lot of people did. Right, so I don't blame Demi, I am an outcast for believing in aliens Lovato, for inserting themselves into this poor woman's alien pregnancy narrative. But this is also a recurring theme throughout the series. Demi adopting things they've learned about the paranormal and retroactively applying it to their own experiences. This is a phenomenon called lying. So after that mess, they go to an alien abduction support group at this church and start listening to these people's stories, and pretty much all of them work out the same way. I am sensitive to paranormal activity. A light shined through my window. I was very young when it happened. I lost a sense of time, and I regained my experience through regressive hypnotherapy. Essentially, it's what you see in any alien movie with some new wave spiritualism sprinkled in. Now it's Demi's turn to go through regressive hypnotherapy. What could possibly go wrong? I actually went through something pretty similar to hypnotherapy for something much less interesting and much less traumatizing than being abducted by aliens. It's this thing called EMDR, and you hold this little gadget in your hands that vibrates back and forth as you recall specific memories. It's sort of like a very technical stance to guided meditation, and that's essentially what Demi does right here. The woman hooks up a brain scanner that they never mention again and asks them all of these questions about their abduction. A process like this can be extremely vivid and emotional, but Demi pretty much just falls asleep. In the very beginning of the session, the woman is already mentally placing Demi somewhere they haven't explicitly stated being in. In therapies like this, you're supposed to give information as you progress rather than being given information in order to progress. This woman says, "See yourself under the stars," when earlier, unbeknownst to this woman, Demi said that they were abducted in their bedroom and not outside. This woman's information as to where Demi is based on the recording that they showed her earlier. Demi then says they saw 3 beings. Remember 3? We made a big deal about 3 earlier, and the beings are all 4-foot-tall aliens. The woman goes, "Do they have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso?" Demi says yes. She goes, "Do they feel familiar? Have you met them before?" Demi pauses and goes, "It's hard to tell." The woman goes, "But you're happy and you're excited that they're there." Later, she adds, "And they're telepathically sending you a message, right?" And so on. You see this, right? Demi being fed information in a relaxed, controlled environment. By the end of this, Demi calls these beings their light doctors, and they protect Demi from themselves. This lady literally laughs, and honestly, I kinda did too. This is delusional and sad. Everyone is just watching them dig themselves into a bigger and bigger hole. It's weird, especially considering Demi's past. And the next episode isn't much better. In the second episode, the first 45 seconds are introduced like this.
For a really long time, I've wondered what happens to us when we die. And in 2018, I almost found out. I didn't see bright lights or anything like that. In fact, some people actually see tall, slender, gray figures that look a lot like what we would call extraterrestrials. So it makes you wonder whether ETs might be waiting for us on the other side.
Yeah, maybe ghosts are aliens, Demi. Yeah, sure, maybe God is an alien. Geez, I think this theory is pretty out there, but I'll keep an open mind as long as you expand on this point later. You're gonna do that, right? Right? So Demi and friends go to this abandoned mining town called Vulture City in Arizona, and on their way, we start to get an idea of everyone's role in the series. Demi is the alien person, their sister Dallas is the ghost freak, and Matthew is still just kinda there. They meet up with this couple who own and take care of the property. We get a general idea of the history, and the couple tells them all these crazy happenings, one of which is literally a picture of his own arm print in dust that he writes off as an Apache ghost making art, and then he just starts crying. Right, okay, so they also vaguely talk about how Native Americans believed that these things called star people would roam around in Vulture City. And they also mention something about giants that's not really brought up again. It's not even understood if star people are giants or if they're separate entities, and I tried looking up any of this for clarity and I couldn't find anything. So what they say is the only information that I have. But Demi theorizes that these star people could be aliens, and the woman of the couple coincidentally claims that she's seen little gray men walking around Vulture City at night. Before they go out hunting, they get cleansed by these Native American men, and Demi pulls some I'm 1/16th Native American BS, and they finally start their uneventful investigation. To summarize, Demi sings to a ghost like in that scene I showed at the very beginning, and they mostly just capture motion through an EMF sensor, which also detects cell phones. So they also catch a very quiet voice saying hello through a spirit box, which has also long been debunked. Going back to Demi's impromptu concert, in the context of the series, this is yet another way that Demi uses the show to vent. A lot. Like, when they're talking to Carmen, the brothel ghost in the scene, Demi sort of pretends to know what this ghost is saying and feeling, but it seems like a projection of their own experiences. Demi even asks this ghost if she's actually an alien, and when she doesn't respond, they write it off as, oh, well, it's because there's men in here and she's scared of men. Like, what? If you've made it this far, you're probably smart enough to understand that all ghost hunting shows are fake, but Unidentified with Demi Lovato makes this fakeness very, very apparent. The fundamental flaw of ghost hunting isn't that ghosts don't exist, but ghost investigations aren't real investigations. Everything runs under the assumption that ghosts exist, and we're trying to prove that they are, as opposed to trying to gather unexplainable evidence and attempt to logically explain it with what we know. We don't know that ghosts exist, so applying the "it's probably a ghost" answer to something you're too lazy to rationally explain is literally the premise of how ghost shows operate and make money. And, well, that is a pretty perfect transition into the third episode, because strap in, we're talking about alien ghost mermaids. The gang heads to Santa Catalina Island on a private jet without a real introduction to what they're actually going to be investigating. As they're flying over the ocean, Matthew jokingly says, Demi, do you think mermaids could be ETs? And the tone completely shifts out of nowhere, and Demi is like, yeah, I think they could, like 100% seriously. They shortly run off this theory that mermaid sightings from the 1800s could have been alien abductions, and at this point I'm laughing by myself alone, wondering why I didn't watch this show sooner, because it is so stupidly entertaining. Oh yeah, and by the way, they never address this ever again. I'm starting to notice this pattern at the beginning of each episode where they just say crazy shit to get your attention, and you know what? I'm not ashamed to admit that it's definitely working. Oh, I forgot to mention, the editor of the show keeps maliciously playing these clips of Demi getting absolutely roasted by Seth Meyers throughout the entire series. In this clip, Demi says that they believe in mermaids, and Seth Meyers is basically like, you're stupid, and then it just sort of ends. They all meet up with this investigator lady who funds living on the island with all of her liar money, and she tells them these two things. There is 100%, totally, definitely a secret alien base under the water, and she can prove it from this old glitched out Google Maps screenshot from 2014 that with a single Google search I debunked as I was watching the show, and that there's this mysterious green door that acts as a portal to another dimension that they literally don't talk about ever again. That's pretty much all that happens in this episode. They interview this Navy veteran named Kevin Day, who talks about his experience in seeing this tic-tac-shaped UFO, which, like, I've seen footage of this stuff before, and I don't know if he's telling the truth or not, but I do know that he wrote an angry Facebook post about it. They spend the remaining half of the show pointing lasers at the sky and recording sounds underwater, and that's it. Like, I'm not kidding. This episode is so boring. At one point, when they start recording stuff underwater, their equipment dies and they're like, well, we can't explain that, and assume it's aliens again. They also capture a really soft boom underwater, and then they say it's probably the door to the alien base closing. Yeah, because it can't possibly be anything else. After they finish recording, they send the audio file off to the lab, and we're sort of led to assume that we'll hear something more mysterious and unexplainable, but 3 days later, they get the audio and whoops, it's just the stupid fucking boom again.
Did you hear that?
Yeah,
What is that?
I don't know.
But, yeah, after hearing this miraculous boom, Dallas and Matthew are like, whoa, we're totally starting to believe in aliens now. And Demi calls Seth Meyers to be like, I told you so, and he just continues making fun of them, and then the episode ends there. The fourth and final episode is appallingly fake. I know, that's been my entire argument for this video, but this episode really does it for me. Demi and friends head to what Demi calls one of the most spiritual places on Earth, Sedona, Arizona, in order to make contact with UFOs. In order to successfully make that contact, Demi believes that organizing a group meditation circle with their fans will help give them more energy. They stay at a spiritual resort in Sedona, and they mention things like how the vortex energy attracts UFOs. And I'm just like, what the fuck does any of that actually mean? Like, genuinely. Surprisingly, we don't get an answer to this. When we get this overview of this massive resort, I can't help but think that most New Age spiritualism is just a culturally appropriative MLM scheme. Later that night, they meet up with this British guy who gives them a basic UFO rundown, and it's pretty much just like a shorter version of Ancient Aliens. He mentions the Battle of Los Angeles that took place right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and essentially the military overreacted and air-raided this weather balloon thinking that they were about to get bombed again. He tries to debate this fact, but the photo that he keeps showing is literally doctored. There's also a part where a moth flies on the projector and they all start laughing because it's shaped like the UFO he's showing, but then Demi once again drastically changes the tone and is like, I think this is a sign, and all that. The next day, they do this remote viewing thing, where Dallas and Matthew go somewhere random and Demi tries to use psychic powers to figure out where they are. The instructor tells both parties to concentrate on where they are and what they're feeling. We see Demi meditating, but both Dallas and Matthew are talking and taking pictures the entire time, not actually doing the experiment correctly. Also, they go with walkie-talkies, meaning they're not somewhere entirely random, and they're in range enough to be able to use them. So that narrows the somewhere random denominator down a lot. Then, Demi is instructed to draw where they think Dallas and Matthew are. And look at this! They're so amazed because it's accurate, but it's literally just 3 circles. Later that day, they meet up with this famous UFO aficionado named Elizabeth April. And remember that joke I made about New Age spiritualism? Allegedly, there is a lot of evidence of Elizabeth April being a UFO cult leader. Allegedly. She sits them down and talks to them about how she can talk to aliens, and she even introduces some alien species through the CGI photos that she claimed she discovered through the power of telepathy or whatever. They sit under this LED pyramid, and wow, finally, this entire episode has been leading up to this moment, and well, they see nothing, and pass it off as something through a bunch of choppy editing and poor camera work. There's this buildup in the beginning where they think they see something, and even Miss Elizabeth April, debunks it by saying it's a satellite. However, once they see the second UFO that, mind you, acts exactly the same as the satellite, it's all like, whoa, no way, we saw an alien, woo! Elizabeth April telepathically talks to them, because of course she does, and she says that these little gray aliens literally say, "We're here for the party." Oh my god.
So the Greys can be funny. They do have a sense of humor. They literally said, "We're here for the party."
So in the end, we learned that through the power of friendship and $10 a month, even you can talk to aliens. I certainly don't think Demi is a bad person for believing in aliens and ghosts and mermaids or whatever. And I certainly don't think using these things to cope with your deeply dark trauma makes them a bad person either. But I think that we can all agree that this show is a disaster. I was originally interested in looking at this series because I love paranormal stuff, even if I don't believe in 99% of it. When I watched the first episode, my angle was to honestly make fun of Demi for this series' intense artificiality. But instead, what I found was a deeply troubled and gullible ex-Disney star. I don't think anyone in this show besides Demi believes in all of this. And honestly, by the end, I started to feel their belief waver too. This series, like all paranormal investigations, rejects skepticism and ironically embraces mainstream thought. It's not unpopular anymore to think that the government is hiding something about aliens, but many paranormal conspiracy heads take pride in this obviously manufactured uniqueness. And I think the culture surrounding these things is really starting to attract particularly white women, which is funny because even though I'm pretty much their target audience, taking something like this as seriously as Demi Lovato does is completely unappealing to me. And honestly, it would be much more annoying if it wasn't so damn funny. Thanks for watching.